What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Awesemo.com on the Contrary Show. It's week 14, only 4 to go here. I'm Dave Loughran. Follow me on Twitter at Laffy_D. It's LOUGHY_D. And with me, as always, the number one ranked DFS player in the world. You may know him as Awesemo, Alex Baker on Twitter at Awesemo DFS. What's going on, brother?
Not much, man. I haven't been having too much luck in these 11 game slates, so I'm excited that we got 13 this week. And we got Andy Dalton revenge on the mind, so this one will be a good one.
Damn right it will. Actually, I don't even know why I'd agree with that, but the game has a lot of intrigue. We're going to talk about that and a lot of other great stuff. But first, we have a guest who joined us last year when Chris Spags was the host, week 1 of the regular season, number 8 ranked DFS player in the world. How often do you get something like this? 2 of the top 10 guys on the same show leading you into a Sunday slate of 13 games. Travis Pettey. Follow the man on Twitter at Pettey Theft. It's PETTEYTHEFT. What's going on, Travis?
It's good. I think I've gone down in the rankings since last year, so I'm trending the wrong way. It's tough to catch Alex at the top, though.
Yeah, I think I'm 11th now. I'm not sure. Ultimately, you guys are both in very good spots, but more so, you can help a lot of people understand the game better and learn from you, which is why we do this show. It's not your typical, cookie cutter. Well, I like this guy, plug him in. It's more trying to take a different approach and look at the game a little bit differently. And Travis, I want to kick it off with you. It's the first 13 game slate we have of the season. And you're going to see ownership very likely spread out more than it usually is, a little bit flat, just given that there's so many good players. Do you do anything different on these big 13, 14, week 17? We're going to have a 16 game slate with every single game happening between 1 and 4 o'clock. Is there any way you differentiate your process or your strategy from what you would do on some of the smaller slates?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I'm on these main slates. I'm more of a quarterback, one player, and then one player opposing kind of guy. So the bigger the slate, I think, is better for me rather than the guys who are doing these huge game stacks, which I think are generally better on the smaller slates. So I think this actually helps me out a lot.
Alex, same thing to you. I mean, you have a process that you fine-tuned over the years. You play essentially every DFS sport there is, and people always wonder, like, how do you handle that? Well, when you get to slate sizes like this, do you do anything different?
Well, I think the biggest difference in this kind of slate size, I mean, the number of players is higher. It's not like a huge amount, but the more players, the more chance that there are some real outlier performances, like we saw a couple of weeks ago with Derrick Henry and Tyreek Hill. Just guys you're going to need to hit in your lineup. So I think that it gives a little bit of extra intrigue, just trying to get the right combinations, and everyone's a little lower owned, so you got to spread your exposure around a little bit more.
And you look at a slate like this, and usually if you talk showdowns, we do a lot of showdown shows throughout the season. You're looking at, saying, well, you have to be different here. You might only need to be different in one spot, but getting a guy at very low ownership. Some of, most slates we get to that, we come to that same conclusion. But what about here? Do you find less incentive to get some of the really, really low owned players, or is that not really anything that factors into your process?
It is a factor, yeah. I think that the more players there are, the less value there is going to some really long dart throws, just because the chance that one of the good players goes off is a lot higher. So that is something to consider, that maybe just picking the best plays is more valuable on bigger slates.
All right, let's dive into some of these games here. We're going to hit on everything, or as much as we can, throughout the hour. Of course, we have 4-hour marathon tomorrow from 9 a.m. all the way up to 1, taking you up to lock, where we'll hit on not only every game, but pretty much everything, and maybe even twice to cover all of our bases. But today we want to hit on a handful of specific games. I think we got 7 or 8 in here, and then some of the chalkier players, and discuss where we're going to go with them. And at the end of the show, our favorite pivots and our favorite fades, and our favorite pivots. And of course, thanks for being with us, guys. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so yet. If you like what we've done here at Awesemo, if you think along the way we've helped you out, maybe help you fine tune your process, win a little bit of money, or you just like the shows, subscribe to the channel, help us get to that 50K mark, and hit that thumbs up button while you're at it. All right, Travis, let's jump into this one. We'll kick it off with the Titans and the Jags. Titans laying 7.5 on the road. This game does have a pretty high total though at 52.5. And I think we can start with Tennessee with just so many moving parts. Derrick Henry is in what many would consider a smash spot, but he's not a pass catching back. And then as far as A.J. Brown and Corey Davis go, Corey Davis is way cheaper, but the guy amazingly has 4 games with double-digit targets and 300-yard games this season. A.J. Brown has 200-yard games and 0 games with 10-plus targets, but he's got double the touchdowns of Corey Davis. What are we doing with the Titans this week?
I mean, the Titans, it sets up perfectly for Derrick Henry, right? Coming off last week, they got blown out. He got completely phased out of the game, which I was a huge fan of. I've been anti-Derrick Henry for a few weeks now, so I was loving seeing that. And I mean, this sets up perfectly, right? You got Jacksonville, horrible run defense. You got the 7-point favorite. I feel like this is a Derrick Henry smash spot. It seems way too obvious, but I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, I mean, Alex, I keep coming back to a spot like this, and Travis just pointed it out as well. It feels like a smash spot for Derrick Henry, but then you get those games where everyone will give you the notion, which is on paper accurate. Hey, this is the game where Derrick Henry goes off. And then Ryan Tannehill, we talked about it a lot last week, rips off 300 yards and 4 touchdowns, whether it's playing with the lead or playing from behind. Is there any way to get different with this? Or are you going to be eating that Derrick Henry, semi-chalk around 17, 18% where we have him projected right now?
Yeah, I think Henry is a strong play. His price does reflect like how good of a spot he's in, given that, he doesn't catch any passes. So I think one of the better spend ups, chance that he gets 2 touchdowns is probably as high as anyone else. So that's really what you're hoping for. More games than not, he's going to score 1, I would say. So pretty consistent source of fantasy points. But I have a feeling a lot of the sharp players might try to pivot off of Henry if he's really chalky and go to the pass catchers just for that leverage.
Yeah, and Travis, it's also a unique week in the sense that you have Derrick Henry on DraftKings specifically in that $8,700 price point. Nobody else is even close to him. You have Dalvin Cook in a tough spot against Tampa Bay all the way up there at 9,400. Christian McCaffrey's unlikely to play. And then you have to come all the way down to 7,600 Aaron Jones. So there's no real direct pivot in that same price point either.
Yeah, it's tough. My personal style, I like to play the good chalk, which I assume Derrick Henry to be, and get a little wild in other spots. He's coming out, he said 19%. Is that what you said? I think he's gonna be a lot higher than that.
Okay.
But again, I like being around the field on him. I would hate to be under on him in this kind of spot. It just seems like you're just praying for a 90 percentile, or excuse me, 10 percentile result.
Right. And we've seen some just slate breaking performances from Henry throughout the year. What about the passing game, Travis? I just mentioned Corey Davis and A.J. Brown, 2 totally different players. A.J. Brown's done a great job of producing after the catch, but for a guy that's priced north of 7K, the volume hasn't really reflected the volume hasn't reflected that salary when you compare him to so many other of the really good receivers in the league. Not to say he isn't one of those, but he has not been a target monster throughout the season.
Yeah, it's one of those weird spots where you got a 7-point favorite, which says, oh, you got to go to the running back, script wise, and Derrick Henry's gonna be big chalk, and you think let's go to the Tennessee pass catcher, but they're not cheap, right? And Tannehill, I'm not a big Tannehill fan. Like we saw last week, he got 30-some points, which is good. He's had a couple good performances this season. But I feel like playing, as they should be playing ahead, rather than last week where they're behind the whole game, they're playing insane catch-up. I'm not a big Tannehill fan here.
What about you, Alex? Is there any way to say, hey, maybe the passing game is where we get to this week and hope that this game somehow becomes a shootout? Because, hey, let's be fair. Every single time we think the Jaguars are just going to get rocked, they find a way to not be terrible, and they've now covered in 4 of their last 5 games. So not to say that'll happen again this week, but it has been happening over the past month and a half.
Yeah, I mean, Mike Glennon has been surpassing expectations for the Jags a little bit. Not to the point where he'd be good in fantasy, but not horrible like some of us expected probably. I think I'm kind of debating this in my head here, where some people are big on the leverage plays where you pick someone off the same team from a different phase of the offense. Like you go for Tennessee receiving instead of rushing. To me, that's not a huge factor. I prefer maybe just going to, it doesn't matter to me that Corey Davis is on the same team as Derrick Henry if I like a receiver around the same price as Corey Davis more. So I don't think Tennessee is necessarily essential to have, especially if Henry has like a 100-yard and a touchdown day. I think that would probably be good enough for Tennessee to get the W here, and he wouldn't really be in the winning lineups, I guess.
Flip to the other side of this game. I don't want to spend the whole show on it, but it is relatively important, especially given one of the higher totals on the slate. Alex, James Robinson, the price is beginning to reflect his production. He's now of the expected active running backs, he's the fourth highest on the slate on a 13-game slate. Nobody would have predicted that happening earlier in the year, but he's averaging an amazing 25.7 looks per game over his last 6, 21.2 carries, 4.5 targets. You just can't ask for better volume than that. Can he exploit this spot against the Titans?
Well, I think he's in a good spot, I guess. Tennessee's defense this year hasn't been especially good. They're about average, and it's really the volume adds up for James Robinson. So I think he's a solid play just because his workload is higher than any other player in the league. And from a raw projection standpoint, I think it's not even crazy to project James Robinson for more points than Derrick Henry because he is so involved in the receiving game.
Yeah, Travis, a pass catching back who's essentially getting all of the volume for everything in that backfield now for Jacksonville. Is there merit to paying that premium for James Robinson this week? And let me ask you this: if you were, would you be opposed to lineups where you had Henry and James Robinson, or is that something you'd like to avoid?
I'm not a huge running back, same game kind of guy. This is a little more unique in that Henry can crush and then Robinson can catch a bunch of passes.
Right.
Robinson's that weird, unique lead back that he might actually be better playing from behind. Maybe not, but it's close. Unlike obviously Henry's the other way other in the spectrum where if they're down, he's probably gets screwed. I think he's perfectly fine. I wouldn't play them together. I think it's okay, but it's not my style. But James Robinson, he's pretty, script proof, which is awesome. But I personally rather get someone like Henry who has that big upside, where I don't know if Robinson has a big upside, whereas Robinson has the floor over Henry.
Mike Glennon has, as Alex pointed out, Travis, been, he's filled in admirably. The expectations weren't exactly high, and he wasn't coming in to replace Aaron Rodgers, right? So it was wasn't expecting a whole lot from him. DJ Shark, Chenault, these type of guys. Is there any way you'd maybe run back Derrick Henry lineups with a pass catcher here, or is this a game where it sounds like you're most interested in Derrick Henry and then maybe some James Robinson?
Yeah, I actually have a little interest in Chark. I think he had a little bit of ownership last week. He failed pretty bad. He had 2 catches on 7 targets, I believe. I think this is a classic bounce back spot. Everybody forgets about him. His ownership goes down, and all of a sudden he comes out of nowhere, and everybody who played him last week is going to be kicking themselves not playing him again.
Alex, before each show, we always go over what games we think would be best to focus on, because again, tomorrow we're going to hit on everything. And with 13 games, there's no way we get to all of that in an hour. So why not get to some of the important ones? One of the ones that you wanted to hit on was this Chiefs and Dolphins game. Chiefs 7.5 point favorites, 50.5 point total. The Dolphins defense has played extraordinarily well this season. I think they've outshined all expectations or overperformed, we could say, throughout the season, regardless of Ryan Fitzpatrick or Tua being at the helm for Miami. But when it comes to Kansas City, you have Tyreek Hill, who has the most explosive ceiling in football, Travis Kelce, the best tight end, and then, of course, Patrick Mahomes can rip off 500 yards and 4 touchdowns in the blink of an eye. What are we doing with these high-priced guys? And what does that do to lineups if you're stacking Kansas City?
Yeah, I think Kansas City is really interesting because, obviously, they're pretty much every week the best stack they're on the slate, with Tyreek Hill being such a big Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce being such a big part of the receiving offense. So they definitely pop in any sort of stack metric. In my top stacks, they're about 20% chance of being the best stack. But that's also including the possibility of stacking both Hill and Kelce. which funnels you into a pretty much like you got to spend like down at everything else to make that fit. So I definitely like the Kansas City stack a lot. I don't think Miami's defense is really as good as the hype. I know they've had big games where they got a bunch of touchdowns and whatnot, but on a per play basis, they've allowed more yards per attempt to the pass and to the run. Actually, I haven't been betting sports a ton, but I threw a bunch down on the Kansas City spread +7. I think the sportsbooks are giving Miami's defense too much credit and Kansas City's offense not enough.
It's fair. Look, as good as they've been, defense hasn't really mattered when it comes to this Kansas City team this year. Just look at the numbers. But, you know, Travis, I've tried to build a couple of lineups with Mahomes, Hill, and Kelsey, and you know, it is going to be difficult. It's going to funnel you to a lot of cheaper options. Maybe you go back with Gaskin, but that's kind of difficult. And I don't know how you feel about the correlation there. What are your thoughts on Kansas City this week, just given the exorbitant price points, but also insane blow-up potential across the board?
I'm not a fan. You know, as was stated before, they're really expensive, right? And I think the case you can make is that they're so expensive that maybe they become contrarian because of that. I think they're overpriced for sure. But it's just not somewhere I'm headed this week. I have very, very little Kansas City right now.
Very little Kansas City stacks or very little Kansas City in general?
Oh, in general, I have no stacks currently.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't think Alex was saying that Miami defense is not that good. I think they're decent. I think they're above average, and I think this is one of the harder Mahomes spots of the year.
For sure. Yeah, look, I think the argument here is, does any defense matter against Kansas City? But Alex, to Travis's point, to go back and forth here a little bit, what the idea is, well, I think their defense is good enough to where those price points seem too high. Not that they're going to stop them, but that they could slow them down just enough to where maybe I don't want to pay a combined, like, what is it, $17,000 almost for Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, I mean, I think the tricky part is if you do go with that combination, like, even though it might be like under-owned technically, like a lot of other people are going to have those exact three players, it's not going to make it that much easier to win, I think. So I think if I'm stacking them up, I'm probably just going to Hill or Kelsey, and then I do like the Gaskin run back. I'm a little bit perplexed why like the sportsbooks have been giving Tua so much credit, because he's averaged less than 7 yards per attempt. He hasn't been very good. He hasn't thrown any picks though, which has been a plus. I'm still kind of intrigued though and going to the Miami stack, because obviously anytime you're playing Kansas City, that's a chance that maybe the passing volume will be high.
I'd be very excited if Tua ended up, having maybe an emergency, but not an emergency that results in anything bad, right? Just it was a false alarm, but he ended up missing the game, Alex, and then Ryan Fitzpatrick had to come in and throw 400 times. That would make me pretty excited, but it's not the case. And I don't know, maybe the difference in terms of win percentage isn't going to be huge when it comes to Fitzpatrick or Tua. But I definitely feel more comfortable throwing guys like Devontae Parker and Mike Gesicki out there if Ryan Fitzpatrick is throwing them the football.
Definitely. Yeah, Fitzpatrick, he's shown that he has that fantasy upside. Tua, of course, he hasn't had a big fantasy game yet, so it's hard to really trust it. But this is football. I mean, it's a sport with a ton of variance. If he throws 3 touchdowns, I mean, he could easily put up a pretty solid fantasy score. And last week he did show some promise. He got 296 yards. That was by far the best game he had. So, I mean, there's potential there.
And he is cheap. I mean, he's cheaper than Dalton and Trubisky and such. Travis, do you think anything from the Miami side stands out this week?
I mean, I'm with you guys. I wish Fitzpatrick got one more chance, kind of like a retirement game right here. Just throw it 60 times, throw his arm out, whatnot. Just let it all go.
And beats the Chiefs. Imagine if his retirement game is beating the Chiefs at home. That'd be special.
I love it. I hope it happens. I'm not a Tua fan either. I feel like whenever I've played him, try to be a little contrarian, he just doesn't do anything. It's like Cam Newton without the rushing, it feels like.
Yeah.
It's not exciting. So on the Miami side, it doesn't really do it for me. Gaskin, I had a lot of them last week. I'm going to go a little bit again this week. he got the majority of the snaps, and I think he's fighting Patrick Laird, which, is a DFS community fan favorite, but in actual football, he's not the greatest player. So I feel pretty good having a little bit of Gaskin. Obviously, it looks like a horrible spot paper for him, being behind and whatnot, but I feel like he has that blow-up potential that you need to win a GPP in this spot.
Travis, the second highest total game on the slate, not to say that that's everything, because we're going to talk about some really low total games as well that definitely have some pieces that we can mine out of that. But is Minnesota at Tampa Bay, 53-point total, and with a lot of cold weather games around the league, this one will not be the case. You're going to be down in Florida. Again, 53-point total. The Minnesota Vikings on the road are 7-point dogs, which maybe I'm crazy. I think the Bucs have been given a lot of credit that might not be deserved this year, but we'll see where that takes us. The Vikings have been one of the teams that I think Alex pointed out last week. You've kind of needed to get them right in some form or fashion over the last month, whether it's fading Dalvin Cook for Derrick Henry, whether it's having Cook, having Jefferson, or having Thielen for his 2-touchdown game. But, the offense is so concentrated between those three players that you feel like there's going to be a blow-up potential or a possibility for at least one or two of them every single week. What are your thoughts about Miami or Minnesota this week against the Tampa team that has had some vulnerabilities in their pass defense, but has done a very good job of locking down opposing running backs? And now you've got arguably the best running back going up against them.
It's tricky. I've been very anti-Minnesota, especially pass catchers, for multiple weeks now, and I've been hurting. I've had a couple close results in the Millie Maker where I think these guys were my issue in multiple weeks. But right now, I don't have much of them. I like Dalvin Cook. He kind of goes in that James Robinson mold where he is kind of immune to game scripts. He can catch a lot of balls if need be. So I think I'm overshare of him, but I'm fading the pass catchers again, even though it seems like Minnesota more than anyone passes when they're down and runs when they're up, which would obviously lead to more of a pass script here and Cousins throwing 50 million times again. But I'm going to give it, I think, one more chance, give Thielen and Jefferson a chance to have a dud one more time and Cook to do well.
Yeah, Alex, Minnesota, I'll toss it right over to you. What are you doing with three players who at one point over the past several weeks or maybe even month plus have been at the top of the Millie Maker, the top of the slant, the top of all of these large field contests?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. These three guys having such big workloads that every single week they're in contention. I do like Cook a lot as a lower ownership pivot against Derrick Henry, where I feel like Cook's a better fantasy player because he does have that game script proof element. So I think that's one direction I could see going. And then the prices on Thielen and Jefferson have gotten really high. So that is a deterrent. But I mean, they together they comprise 50% of the Minnesota passing offense. So I think that if you're expecting a lot of pass volume, maybe they're trailing Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook is off the field, he's not as big an impact, then Thielen and Jefferson should be in a good spot. But I don't know if any of them are really high enough ownership to really justify a leverage play.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask you about the stack because very seldom do we see someone like Kirk Cousins get a lot of ownership. And this week we've got him projected for 2.7 in our top stack tool. Again, 2.7. Top stack probability is almost double that, which, is somewhat encouraging. But in the event that they can't get the ball moving on the ground, I will say this much. Madison has already been ruled out. So I think Cook is going to be on the field no matter what happens, even as a touchdown dog. Could you see yourself getting to any Minnesota stacks here and foregoing Dalvin Cook, but going straight to Thielen, Jefferson, and Kirk Cousins?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Minnesota is a team that has a good passing offense, more than 8 yards per attempt on the year. And they just don't pass that much because they really run Davin Cook out there a ton. So I think this is one of the teams where maybe you target one game script and it might be even better than it looks if you get that right game script. So in this particular game where they're big dogs to Tampa Bay, maybe that gives the pass catchers a little bit of an edge. This is another one too, though. You guys were saying where it's like, sportsbooks give Tampa a ton of credit. I feel like it's a little bit undeserved because Tom Brady hasn't been very good. So I'm a little bit tempted to be over on Minnesota and under on Tampa in this game.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. The fantasy points, Travis, have not been bad for Brady. I mean, he's had a few, as a matter of fact, monster games this season. But you take the last one against Kansas City, that game ended with a 3-point margin, a victory for Kansas City. But at no point in time was it actually close. Tampa Bay made a bit of a run late in the game, made the box score look a little prettier. But I mean, to win that game, it would have been a miracle. And Tom Brady still put up big numbers. But the issue I have, and I think people would love to hear from you on this, is how do you try and sift through the weeds when it comes to it was already tough enough with Mike Evans and Godwin, and then Rob Gronkowski, and even Scotty Miller when we had him out there. But now you add in Antonio Brown to the mix. Even if Tom Brady does go off, you have to not only get that right, but as Ben Rossa would say, you have to get both of them right. Where he goes off, you have to nail that, and then you have to nail who he's actually going to throw the football to.
It's horrible. It's really, really difficult. There's just way too many guys.
Yeah.
And I say that, and usually I'd stay away from games like this, but I literally like Antonio Brown this week. I feel like this time coming off a bad game, but he's had a couple big weeks in terms of targets, but his production or his efficiency hasn't been good per target. Hasn't been nearly good enough. But maybe I'm just getting caught in 2017 Antonio Brown, whatever he was last, very relevant. But I just feel like he's dying for that big game. I feel like this Minnesota secondary being as bad as it is just the perfect situation for him. His price is at 5,500 is low enough, I think, to take a very serious shot in him here and go heavy.
I really wish I disagreed with you because it's so difficult to get this team right. But when you look at the target counts on these guys, going off the last 4 games since Antonio Brown entered the fold, it's not like he's well behind Mike Evans or Chris Godwin, Alex. It's just they're all so tightly grouped together that maybe the same argument can be made here. So at play the cheapest one as it could be for the Dallas Cowboys, where since Andy Dalton took over, there's no clear-cut alpha. It hasn't been Cooper. It hasn't been CeeDee Lamb. Gallup's been a lot more involved than he was when Dak Prescott was at the helm. Maybe do we just play the cheapest guys and hope that it plays out for us? What do you say?
Yeah, I think that's not a bad option. I see Chris Godwin's price is a little bit lower than Mike Evans, so he looks like a nice play. Godwin's stats this year have been pretty incredible, catching more than 80% of passes for 11 yards, 11 and a half yards per catch. That's elite efficiency, like so much better than Antonio Brown so far and Mike Evans. So he'd be my preference. I do think he makes a lot of stack if you're going to run out a Minnesota stack to maybe run it back with Godwin.
I'm waiting for a naked Brady stack to win the Millie, where he just throws like 5 touchdowns to 5 different players and none of them go above 50 yards. I don't know. It's possible. I'm not recommending that. But Alex, what about another spot where if the passing game wasn't difficult enough to figure out for Tampa Bay, the run game hasn't been much easier because, well, Bruce Arians decided that he'd bring Leonard Fournette into the mix and have him compete with Ronald Jones for targets and drop 17 passes per game. What could go wrong? But Ronald Jones has been the one with the clear higher ceiling this year. 2 of his last 3 games, he's had some pretty solid outings. Actually, he tied for 98, tied 3 other players for the longest touchdown run ever, had 192 yards on 23 attempts and almost 30 fantasy points back in week 10, and then caught a nice 37-yard touchdown pass a couple weeks ago in week 12. Is there any reason to say maybe Ronald Jones at low ownership could be a guy to get to if they take an early lead over Minnesota?
Definitely. Yeah, I think Ronald Jones is a solid contrarian play. Over the last 4 weeks, Jones has gotten 72% of all the team's rushing attempts. So, I mean, to me, that kind of shows that over a big sample, they're really preferring him over Fournette. I mean, that could change at any time, and Fournette is their preferred pass catching back. Tampa's the favorite in this game, though, so the most likely thing is Jones is getting a good workload. So I think he's a solid play.
Do you have any interest in this backfield for Tampa, Travis?
You know, when I look at it, it's actually a lot more interesting than it looks, at first glance. I'm seeing 5% ownership for Ronald Jones right now, which you see the total, 30-point total, 7-point spread is their favorites. It screams Ronald Jones or Leonard Fournette. But I think what scares people is that they seem to be sharing the backfield. Not one guy seems like he's a lot better than the other. But if one guy starts off hot, they ride him, and Tampa Bay has a big game. One of these guys could completely crush the slate at their low ownership. Absolutely.
Yeah, I see it too. And we've seen Ronald Jones do it in the past. It's just so, again, it's really tough. If you're playing this game, Alex, I think, let's, before we close this game out, let me ask you this then. What would your best advice be if you're playing Minnesota, Tampa Bay? Maybe you're hand building, you're playing single entries, 3-max, you're not MMEing, and it's a little bit different, right? So you have to make, you don't have the opportunity or the option to expand your player pool to the point where you say, hey, okay, I can still get some of this game, but I don't have to go insane. Maybe you're playing 3-5 lineups. What would you recommend doing with Minnesota, Tampa Bay, just given how unpredictable this would be, or this team has been?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you have some really solid fantasy options in this one. So top of the list would be the 3 guys from Minnesota for me. And then Tampa Bay, like Ronald Jones and Godwin are solid. I mean, I don't think anyone in this game is like a must play, or you got to have a piece of it though, because I mean, it's not like Tampa Bay's offense is that good and they have a good defense. So you could see an ugly game here too.
Travis, I remember last season, maybe week 1 or week 2, Curtis Samuel was chalk and then everyone wrote him off after a couple of weeks. Who was the other one? Was it Keelan Cole that was minimum salary? I think he was chalk as well and ended up not doing a whole lot. But now Curtis Samuel is pulling 20+% ownership. At Awesemo, where we have our ownership projections, 3 players are projected for 20+%. And the second highest is amazingly Curtis Samuel because, well, Christian McCaffrey isn't expected to play and DJ Moore isn't expected to be activated from that COVID-19 list. Is Curtis Samuel worth it to you this week to maybe get around or above the field, or do you see yourself coming under on someone that's $5,200?
It's tough. That ownership is crazy for Curtis Samuel at 5,200. It doesn't make any sense to me. But like you said, Moore's out, McCaffrey's out. They're losing a lot of their guys who get heavy touches. So I think I'm gonna be probably around the field. I don't have a strong leaning either way on him. It's really hard, I think.
Alex, do you have any lean on Curtis Samuel at this ownership?
I think he's a good play. I mean, you got DJ Moore out. What I'm looking for in wide receivers as value picks is the potential to get more snaps. So I think that over the last 3 weeks, or the last 4 weeks, I'll say, Curtis Samuel has run routes on 78% of dropbacks. That could see a bump with DJ Moore out to around 90%. So that would be a solid increase. And then you throw in that DJ Moore is going to be replaced by some combination of Brandon Zylstra and Farrell Cooper. These guys have total 3 catches on the year. So they're just not like big factors. And I think that benefits everyone else on the team even more.
All right. What about Mike Davis, who has let a lot of people down? He's also won a lot of people tournaments this year earlier on when you were getting him cheap. Of course, his ownership was high, but that's besides the point. He's $6,400. And I think we could say his usage has been a little bit erratic. After those first few games that Christian McCaffrey was sidelined, where Mike Davis was pretty much just a lock in every lineup, you've seen him come back down to earth. He had 4 straight games with single-digit fantasy points. McCaffrey played in only 1 of them. And then the last 2 games have been modest production at best, although he did see 20+ looks in each of his last 2 games against Detroit and Minnesota, respectively.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Travis, and then I'll go to you, Alex.
Sorry, I was thinking about how exciting Mike Davis was the first 4 weeks of the season, and everybody's forgotten about him. Kind of like I just forgot about how you're talking to Alex, and I talked over him. But yeah, he's interesting, right? I feel like at 6,400, I think he's pretty fairly priced, but people forget, like, if he plays really well, I feel like he can run the hot hand, run a little more snaps, get a couple touchdowns. Like he could really win the slate for somebody. And he's coming at 9% right now, which is, it seems a little low to me actually, especially given that his two receivers are 15 and 22%. So he makes a decent leverage play on top. I think he's really good and he's going to be overlooked this week.
Yeah, look, Alex, there's no doubt that right now there isn't another running back in Carolina's backfield that's really going to compete with Mike Davis for opportunities. It's just a matter of how much he's involved in the game plan, which, as we've seen from the past 2 weeks, again, 20 plus opportunities at 6,400. Do you agree with Travis that sub 10% is too low for Davis this week?
I think so. I think his workload has gone down a little bit since the start of the year. They have Rodney Smith and Trenton Cannon mixing in more. But the matchup versus Denver is really solid, where Carolina is a favorite in this one. And they aren't a favorite in very many games. So that indicates that there's potential for Mike Davis to see a large amount of carries. And he's good pass catching too, but I like that upside. So I think that reasonably priced in a really good matchup.
And I think, Travis, on the other side of this game, I don't know what type of ideas people are getting, but maybe you can give us your take on this one as well. The Broncos have an implied total of 20.75. They're 3-point dogs. This game, 44.5 point total. So not a ton of projected scoring here, but that doesn't always mean that you can't pick out some quality options. Melvin Gordon's 5,200. He got a lot of work last week and had a 100+ yard game against Kansas City. But it's important to also acknowledge that Phillip Lindsay, while he wasn't productive, had only one fewer carry than Melvin Gordon. And the passing game has just, for all intents and purposes, been in disarray this year, despite having some good young talent in Noah Fant and Jerry Jeudy. Is there anything we can get to here?
Yeah, Broncos are tough. Like that stat you just said is incredible. That Gordon, one more carry, 105 more yards. That's insane. Same team, same game, and for some reason Melvin Gordon, of anybody, was finding the holes. Which, as a Chargers fan, I'm not a huge fan, but that's for another show. Fant would be my guy here, and maybe it's too obvious. I feel like all the pass catchers on the Broncos are somewhat similar. You know, the Jeudy, Fant, Patrick, and to a lesser extent Hamler. I like the tight end eligibility of Fant. And I think it just, with tight end this year especially, I think it's been kind of hard to fill. I'd rather just go with Fant than the other similar wide receivers to him.
Do you have anything from Denver, Alex?
Yeah, I kind of like Tim Patrick. He's had some big fantasy performances, and his price is still low. 4,200 on DraftKings, 5,400 on FanDuel. And he's out there on almost 100% of the plays. 97% last week and 100% on dropbacks previous week. He's getting targeted at 18% of those. So very solid metrics as far as usage. And he's going to need a lot of volume because Drew Lock isn't that good. So I do see some potential with Tim Patrick. So
while this is an NFL show, there's no better time to tell you about the promo we got going on right now, even though it's basketball, because it's insane. For $1, using the promo code Caruso, I'm sure you'll love that one, Alex. CARUSO. Using the promo code Caruso at checkout gets you all of our preseason content for NBA. Kicked off yesterday, or tipped off yesterday, I should say. We got some great free content in the shows, but all of our premium preseason content, plus the first week of the regular season, which once you get to the regular season includes ownership. It includes the boom bust tool. It includes the projections, everything we have, all of our premium articles, the deep dive that these guys put so much time into, you name it, lineup builder, all of that for $1. So if you do it now, it's good all the way through the 29th of September, December. I think that's right. It has to be right? Because the first week of the season doesn't start till around Christmas. So, I mean, if you're a new user, you got to do it. You got to sign up. It's $1. So you won't even notice that you have this until you go in there, because you're not going to see it in your bank account, losing $1, but gaining so much at Awesemo. Go to awesemo.com/join. Check it out. Again, all the preseason content and the first week of regular season content everything we have, all access to our NBA product. We'd love for you guys to check this out. And if you have any questions, again, my DMs are open. You can hit me up on Twitter, or you can email us as well. If you have any questions, problems, concerns, you name it, we'll be sure to take care of you. So use the promo code Caruso, all access NBA through the 29th of December for $1 single at checkout at awesemo.com/join. All right. Travis, one game that I wanted to hit on, and it's ugly on paper. There's no doubt about it. But it intrigues me, is the Cowboys on the road against the Bengals. The Cowboys have had games this season where they've allowed 307 rushing yards and 297 rushing yards. Amazing. I think those are two of their three worst rushing yard totals allowed in the history of the Dallas Cowboys. Someone can fact check me on that. But with Joe Mixon not returning, you have someone like Gio Bernard now who earlier in the week wasn't projecting for much, but I can only imagine that he's going to be I guess he's not going to be popular this week. But you know what? Let me throw it over to you and get your take on Joe Mixon. I'll stop talking. Right now we have him under 7% against the Cowboys.
You know, when you said I got an ugly game to talk about, I was like, just say Dallas, Cincinnati. Just say it. I love that game. I love it.
Me too.
It's horrible. Nobody should want it, which makes it perfect, right? When I saw Gio Bernard, he was 7% on my thing. I think it's amazing. You know, he is a lead back. He's sharing a little bit, right? I think last week it was like 70-30 with Samaje Perine. He just seems like one of those guys, if you could actually have some efficiency, because he's been horrible rushing for a while. For 4 weeks, I see about 3.5 yards a rush. If you can just have one big game, you can turn that into, say, 85% of the snaps or so. He can go off against Dallas. This is the team to do it against. You named the stats right there. They're horrible. And, you know, he had some pretty tough teams he was playing against. I say Miami, Giants, Washington, and Pittsburgh. And now he's playing Dallas. It's night and day. I think this is a smash spot for him.
Me too. It's scary, Alex, but how can you not trust the guy with that mustache? It's it's an incredible looking mustache on him. Go ahead.
I clicked him just because of the picture, and it doesn't hurt that he's in a great matchup. I think Bernard's a really solid play. The main factor here is just there's no one that really you can play under 5K except Bernard. That's going to be a number one back. And then you throw in the fact that he's in a great matchup and he catches passes too. I think he's definitely one of the better plays on this slate at running back.
All right, so we're all in agreement that if Gio, I think even if Gio came in around like 10 or so, that he'd probably still be under. I'm willing to take shots on someone that might not be the greatest running back, but is going up in arguably the greatest matchup that he's going to face all season in a game where they're only field goal dogs against another team that doesn't have their starting quarterback, but they do have, Alex, and you tweeted this earlier in the day, a revenge game for none other than Andy Dalton. Are you riding this narrative to $1 million on Sunday?
Well, I'm tempted. I mean, like Andy Dalton, definitely someone that's very angry and will do his best against his former team. So, I mean, to be honest, he's really sucked at Dallas. Like the depth of target is like minimal. He's averaged less than 6 yards per attempt. He's throwing interceptions. So all the factors are telling me no. But my heart, because of my love of revenge, says yes.
All right, Travis. I think I mentioned it earlier in the show, but like with Cooper and Lamb and Gallup, it's hard to figure out which one of these guys is going to be prioritized each week. And maybe the argument just is that none of them are. And Andy Dalton's not going to play favorites. He just might not play good football either, but it is the Cincinnati Bengals. So we talked about Gio. What about on the other side of this game with a bunch of talented pass catchers and a quarterback who is doing his best to fill in for Dak Prescott, but not exactly shining?
You know, I was hoping to come on the show, learn a couple things as I was on it, and I didn't know that Andy Dalton was angry. That's the kind of insider info I came for. I will have 1% of Andy Dalton at least just for that right there. That's great.
Andy, Angry Andy is what they call him.
You know, that again, I didn't know that either. So this is great. Yeah. This is great. Maybe a naked Andy Dalton. Maybe it's his week. But I don't have much of the pass catches. I'm actually more of a Zeke guy. I've had Zeke for a handful of weeks now. And you look at his box scores, game logs, it's bad. It's bad. He's had 1 week in the last like maybe 2 months that's been reasonable winning tournament. He had the 22.5 against Minnesota. Other than that, it's been really bad. Cincinnati, though, is not a good team. And, I guess they're not the worst. They're pretty bad defense, I feel like. So I feel like this might be Zeke, Bernard week. The running backs have been horrible and making their bounce back.
You know what kind of captured Zeke's season in a nutshell was Tuesday night, where he had 3 straight attempts at the 1 yard line and got stuffed on all 3 of them consecutively. Man, that was tough to watch.
It ruined my night.
Yeah, I think it hurt a lot of us because then they scored, right? Didn't it go to Amari? I think it went to Cooper for a touchdown.
Yeah, I think now you remind me. I think I was actually winning my first showdown slate until that happened. I was so excited about it. I was going to profit. And then all of a sudden Amari comes out of nowhere, and then they did a bunch of stuff later in the game anyway, so it didn't matter. But
yeah,
it sucks that Zeke, who looks a little overweight, can't just plunge right in. I feel like that should be his strength now.
You would sure think so. And Alex, we know I'm willing to make some excuses. Their offensive line has been banged up for sure. And then they recently lost Zach Martin as well, which really hurts. But does Zeke stand out to you as a viable option this week? We talked, you, Travis, myself about, hey, Gio in a good matchup in a game that only has a 3-point spread. But on the other side, Elliott hasn't been very good at all, but you could apply that same logic to him. Say, okay, maybe the Bengals run defense isn't as bad as Dallas, but it doesn't feel like anyone's going to take a huge lead in this game. And maybe they just keep feeding him the football in what should be close enough contest.
Yeah, I mean, Dallas and Cincinnati both have the backup quarterbacks in. So this one, it's 2 really bad teams going up against each other. And that really it creates a game where like both teams are going to be way better than average because they have the good matchups with and the fact that they can't sustain drives is kind of neutralized because they're going up against a team with that similar tendencies. So I think that Gio, Bernard, and Zeke really do stand out as plays that are going to be significantly better this week than your average week, just because their chance of winning games is a lot higher for both teams than average.
Remember, you guys can check out all of our shows in podcast form. Any platform that has podcasts, you can find us on there. Awesemo, AWESEMO. Remember to check out our free content if you're not a paid sub. Today on the schedule, we've got the NFL rankings for free and the MMA rankings also free. I'm assuming Jason Floyd and Pete Rogers also going to go live for Live Before Lock tonight as well at YouTube right here on the Awesemo channel. So stick around for that and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet. Get us up to that 50K mark. Make our Christmas. Alex, we're not making 50K by Christmas or by the end of the year. It was a failed attempt, but we're going to get there soon enough.
Yeah, well, we appreciate all you guys watching. I mean, supporting the community has been amazing. 50K is just a number anyway, man. We don't care about that.
Yeah, but I'm embarrassed. I try. It's a pride thing. I don't know, Travis. The Falcons and Chargers, though, in another game, 49.5 point total. Falcons 1 point road favorites. This season is so strange. The level of parity in the NFL is so wild. Like the Patriots come out 45-0 victory over the Chargers, despite having less than 300 yards, total yards. And then they come into a primetime matchup and get smoked against the LA Rams. Newton gets benched. What an ugly, hard to watch performance that was from the Patriots. But Justin Herbert, despite how bad this team has played and how many games they've lost by 1 possession all season long and how bad Anthony Lynn is, I'll stop there. Herbert and Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler are still some of like the three of the preeminent options in the league and have been all season long when healthy.
Yeah, it's been a tough couple of weeks for the Chargers. I mean, seeing that they lost 45-0 and then what happened to the Patriots the very next game.
Yeah.
And that's not very Chargers-like either. You know, their team usually stays in the game and then Anthony Lynn blows it somehow and they lose by 3 at the end.
Every week. Yep, you're absolutely right.
And I thought I could never be more disappointed in the Chargers. And then they found a new way to lose 45-0. How does it even happen? Against the Patriots. The Patriots aren't that good.
No.
But fantasy-wise, you're getting me excited now, and not a good way. Patriots-wise or Chargers-wise, yeah, Eckler, Allen, Herbert, all very good. Allen, since Eckler got back, hasn't been as good. But I feel like that tree right there, you can stack all three of those guys. I think get a good game in all three. I think there's enough offense for the three of those guys. And then you could also have like a Hunter Henry. I think is very, very good as well. We haven't seen that big game out of him yet. I think his ceiling is what 14.8, which is incredible. I feel like he has that eruption game coming eventually. I think there's a lot of ways to go with the Chargers, especially against Atlanta, who's just they're not a good team.
What do you think, Alex?
I really like the Chargers because, like, for the first part of the season, they were really run heavy. Over the last 3 weeks, they've averaged only 26% rushing attempts in neutral game script situations. You can find that in the advanced stats page on Awesemo. So 3 weeks is a pretty good sample that they're just going to be throwing the ball more than they have been. And I like that because the efficiency has been decent and you got talented receivers. So I'm in on it.
Okay. Who are your favorite options from both sides of this one? Let's say you're stacking, because I think we'd all agree this is one of those games that could very easily pop off. And, you know, you end up seeing two pretty bad teams scoring a lot of points and not being able to stop each other. Atlanta right now, what do we have the projected ownership out for a stack? 6%. And the Chargers are at like 8.8%. So this game isn't going to go unnoticed, but what would your preferred ways be to attack it?
Since Julio Jones is out this week, that makes Calvin Ridley stand out as an elite option. There is a narrative that Calvin Ridley is not as good with Julio out, so I'm hoping maybe that will drive down the ownership just a tad. I really think that when you take a guy like Julio out, the increased passing volume to other or receiving targets to other guys accounts for more than any efficiency differences. Russell Gage also is very reasonably priced. He's going to see the field almost every drop back with Julio out. So I think that both of those guys are really solid. So because of that injury to Julio, the edge for me goes to Atlanta.
Okay. Travis, same question to you. If you're attacking this game, what's your favorite way to stack it?
I think it's going to be a pretty solidly owned game, right? You lose Julio and high scoring, two not very good teams. I think we need to differentiate somehow. I'm actually not as big of a Russell Gage fan. He didn't do very well last time Julio was out. I'm more of a Hayden Hurst guy. I'm going a little more contrarian. Last time Julio was out, I think was Vegas, 2-3 weeks ago. He had eight targets, over 20% target share. He's under 4K. He's a tight end. I think there's a lot to like there. He hasn't had a very good game, kind of like Henry, but I feel like he's that contrarian piece you need in the stack.
Another game too. We got about 5 minutes to go here. Travis, that's getting that has the highest total right now is going to be Green Bay at Detroit. And they got rid of, they cleaned house to some extent, right? In Detroit, getting rid of Matt Patricia. And I always forget the name of the GM that they got rid of, but they bring in Darrell Bevell and they come in and they grab a come from behind victory against Chicago. And you actually saw a somewhat competent looking football game, if only for a week, maybe, I don't know. But now this week, Davante Adams ownership at 9,300 on DraftKings is the highest we have projected among anybody. But Aaron Jones is also in our top 6 or 7 right now. So again, you've got Adams up there. You also have Aaron Jones up there, which means that we're going to have to make some decisions on how to approach the Green Bay Packers this week with a wide receiver and running back getting a ton of love.
It's crazy, right? I mean, Davante Adams, 9,300, he might be peak price, actually. He's close to peak price, but he's not. He's the highest owned guy, and he's proven he should be. It's incredible how productive he's been. And, I've been one of the guys who feels like this is not sustainable, but, it's kind of like Derrick Henry last year. The end of the season just keeps going off over and over and over. I'm probably going to be under on that and under on the Green Bay Packers in general. I feel like they've had so many good games in a row. I just feel like they're due for a letdown eventually. I know they have a 31-point total, but these salaries are getting really big. I feel like there's just players at similar salaries that are better value plays.
Yeah, Alex, you're paying a premium for these guys, no question. I'd even make the argument that Aaron Jones is at a premium as well, because while he had that big run for 77 yards late in the game against Philly, he had been bottled up prior to that. Now, look, you can't take one play out and say, all right, well, look, he wasn't actually good. I understand that, but it's been a relatively rough 1.5 months for him, and he is expensive. So what do you do what do you do with the ownership and the price points on these guys?
Well, I think the matchup versus Detroit is a very good one. So definitely Adams and Aaron Jones are solid plays. I think Aaron Jones coming off of a big game where he won people the millionaire, if I call it correctly. It's hard to keep track of the weeks. Yeah, that was last week. So that'll drive his ownership up. But my general feeling about Aaron Jones is he's one of the most inconsistent players in the league because he's got a really good offense, but the playing time is split with Jamal Williams, and that's very difficult to predict. So I'd just rather go at that kind of price tag of 7,600 on DraftKings to a guy that has a little bit more steady role. That's just my personal preference.
Okay. What about the Detroit side? Again, they're pretty significant dogs here, as they should be. 9-point dogs at home, as a matter of fact. But the Packers have also done a good job of slowing down opposing passing attacks, but have struggled on the ground when teams are willing to actually run against them. Of course, they can't be behind by 2 scores early on. So before we get to our top fades and pivots, I'll ask each of you guys to close out our games. What about the Detroit Lions? Alex, and then you, Travis.
I like that last week, the first week of the new GM or the replacement, to Patricia. Sorry, he was the coach. But anyway, you get my idea. They threw a lot more. Only 39% of their plays in neutral game script were rushing plays when their season average has been 47%. So that really makes me feel like even though it's one game, that maybe we see more passing attempts out of Stafford going forward. And Green Bay's defense isn't that good. So I feel like maybe TJ Hawkinson stands out a little bit as the best play on the Lions because with their they made this statement that they were releasing Marvin Hall because he was too old and to give guys like Quintus Cephas and Jamal Agnew more playing time. So they actually have 5 wide receivers that are playing significant snaps. Only Marvin Jones is really playing a large volume of snaps. So it's hard to get to any of the guys except TJ Hawkinson, in my opinion.
And Travis, it sucks that right when DeAndre Swift looked like he was wrestling away the running back, the lead role from Adrian Peterson, he catches a concussion and then he's out for several weeks and Peterson starts racking up the points.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure what I think it said he had a full practice yesterday.
Yeah, but still questionable, which is
right.
I'm assuming he plays, but his status has been weird for the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, so his status changes a lot, obviously. If he's playing, I think there would be more comfortable running the ball. But like Alex said, that, new coach, new system, and that's very important to know. I'm not a huge fan of them in this spot. I think without Galladay, I think they're pretty fairly priced overall, and Green Bay is a tough team to play against. I think if you were to have a lot of Green Bay or be big on Green Bay, I think it makes a lot of sense to have a decent amount of Detroit too. But seeing right now, I'm not big on Green Bay. I also don't have much Detroit.
All right, Travis Pettey, we loved having you on the show, man. Follow him on Twitter at Pettey Theft, but it's an EY, Pettey. I'll trust that you can spell theft on your own. Follow Alex at Awesemo DFS, myself, Laffy_D, LOUGHY_D, and Awesemo.com at Awesemo_com. And remember, use that promo code Caruso to get all of your free NBA content. Well, it is basically free, but it's $1 all the way up through the 29th. Full first week of the regular season, all of the projections, everything we have included, and the preseason stuff. Let's wrap it up. Week 14, as we always do, our top pivot our fade of the week and top pivot of the week. And I'll just say this before we jump into it. I think, as Alex and Travis pointed out at the beginning of the show, it's probably less important this week than it would be on a smaller slate, just given that ownership isn't going to be crazy high on any several players. Alex, lead us off. Who's your favorite fade or top fade of the week?
My top fade of the week is Aaron Jones. I'm not jonesing for some Jones. I think that he only sees about, 2/3, if that, work out of the Green Bay running back group. So I just feel like that's going to be too unpredictable to justify that kind of price tag. And I really like the other options at the high end for running back. I mean, Derrick Henry versus Jacksonville, that's a smash spot. My favorite pivot, though, is Davin Cook. Davin Cook is projected for less than 5% ownership because people just don't like paying up for running backs as an underdog. But his workload is insane given that Minnesota runs the ball so much, and he's the guy that's out there like getting 30 carries a game sometimes. With Madison out, that workload is going to be insane. It's a matter if they can make it work versus Tampa Bay's strong rushing defense. So I understand the lower ownership. I think there's a ton of potential for Cook to smash.
Good stuff. Travis, top fade and top pivot of the week.
No, currently top fade, I'd say David Montgomery. He's the #1 running back in the Awesemo ownership. He's been really good lately, and people forget the rest of the season, though he wasn't very good. I saw Cordarrelle Patterson get a goal line rush, and that's a big red flag for me for an expensive running back. If someone else is getting a goal line rush, and there's no reason he should have got it there. And I think Cordarrelle actually had like 10 carries last game or 2 games ago. So that's a big red flag for me. I think people are going to try to play the momentum. They're going to keep playing him. He's been good for 2 weeks, and I'm hoping this is the spot he lets down. As for a pivot, I'm going to go pivot off of Montgomery with 2 guys. If you got 100 extra bucks, go Zeke Elliott. I think he's a much better play here. He's slightly less ownership, but if you want to go 100 bucks less, you go Mike Davis, who also is leveraged on Curtis Samuel as well. I think Mike Davis in this is a much better script that he's been having. He was very good early in the season. I think we could see it again here, and he's coming at half the ownership of Montgomery.
Love it. I'll close it out with, I was going to go Gio Bernard, but I think we all talked about him enough. If he's that low on, then I'm 100% on board. But Curtis Samuel pulling a ton of ownership right now. I understand that this team is going to be limited when it comes to passing options, but I think there's other ways for them to find ways or to win this game. And with such a low total, it wouldn't be surprising if it's just not a lot of scoring. Give me someone Travis talked about earlier in the show as a pivot, Antonio Brown. It's tough to figure out who's going to be the guy in Tampa Bay, but with a game that has a total of more than 10 points higher than that Carolina game, Antonio Brown, while off the field has had his issues, is still one of the more talented wide receivers in football and has seen a double-digit target game since coming to Tampa Bay. I think you could end up getting virtually no ownership and a potentially huge game against a banged-up and inferior Minnesota secondary. So that'll do it for us, guys. Thanks for watching. As always, hit that thumbs up and subscribe before you go. And remember, stick around because tomorrow, right here on the channel, we've got the marathon, 4 hours of content leading you all the way up to lock, and all of it's free. So we hope to see you there. Good luck this weekend, and we'll catch you back here next week for Week 15's On the Contrary.